at where we left off last class. So remember, your task was to think about a safety helmet and think about that protective lining that's wrapped around your head. Would you rather the lining be made up of foam that contains lots and lots of air bubbles? Or would you prefer the lining around your head to be wrapped around maybe a sheet of glass? And we talked about objects that are soft, objects that are plush, made up of many layers. They do, and also contain a lot of air. They do an excellent job absorbing energy. They will often deform when energy transfers into it, and they can maintain their stability or their shape without breaking. So hard, rigid objects tend to resist energy. So as energy transfers into a hard, rigid object during a collision, that object wants to resist that energy, and any energy that does come in is usually disturbing the molecular structure of that object, causing it to break or shatter or fracture. So what's the advantage of a material that absorbs energy well versus a material that does not absorb energy very well? Well, energy that is absorbed well by the material wrapped around this person's head, which in this case is a bunch of air bubbles located in some foam, what happens is that it is the air bubble that deforms as it accepts the kinetic energy of a hit, and eventually it will pop. And we talked about last class how that popping is a good thing, because when that air bubble pops, all of the energy that the air in each pocket of air gained is being released into the outside environment. Therefore, there's no kinetic energy to get to your head. That's the safety feature in safety helmets. However, if the protective lining around the person's head was glass or any other rigid, hard material, as the energy transfers into the object tends to resist that energy, and it will break. So that leaves an opening or a pathway for the energy to get to, the energy of the collision or the energy of the hit, to get to the person's head. So it's the person's head that is harmed, right? Because the energy is able to reach the person's head in that collision. Now, if you are in my Block 2 class, we were in the middle of copying this diagram, so you do need to pause the video at this time if necessary, to finish the drawing on your CAMI document. Okay, so now I would like for you to switch over to the tab that has your homework in it, the real life applications to the BB lab, or the bouncing balls lab. We completed the first 2 boxes together in class on either Monday or Tuesday of this week, and right now we want to talk about the 3rd box. Softer materials perform the same way as air. Soft materials are plush. They're made of many layers. They contain a lot of air. They're very flexible. Those types of materials do an excellent job accepting or absorbing energy in a collision, and they will deform easily. And then here's examples of deformations. So if you see craters or cracks, if you see flat spots in the material, and those are all examples that energy transferred into that object, and the object absorbed that energy well by deforming. So if you need to, feel free to pause this video and finish correcting the 3 boxes on page 1 of your personal copy of this CAMI document. Okay, so now what I would like to do is take the time to go over the answers to pages 3 and 4 of your homework that you submitted at 8 a.m. this morning. So we're going to look at safety helmets, and we're going to also look at mattresses. Okay, so any safety helmet, there's lots of different types of safety helmets for different activities. So you can think of helmets for riding a horse, riding a bike, helmets for sports. There's many different designs, but all safety helmets are made up of these three parts that you see right here. All safety helmets will have an outer hard shell, usually made of a pretty strong rigid material. And then directly underneath what we call the shell or hard outer lining of the helmet would be what we call the foam lining. And it's usually a pretty firm foam, but we already know that foam, styrofoam, polystyrene, these are all different foam materials. They contain thousands and thousands of air bubbles. And they're very thick, they are flexible, they are quite soft, and obviously very plush. So here, this white area is the firm foam lining, and then what you see in black here is the hard outer shell. In red is the hard outer shell, and here is the firm foam lining. This is the outer shell, and then here's the firm foam lining. The third piece that you would see in any safety helmet, regardless of the activity that you're doing, is strips of flexible pieces of foam. You can't really see that in this picture, but you can see this little black strap right here. That is an extra, actually this whole blue lining, if you were to feel it between your fingers, it's going to feel a little plush and squishy because it's made up of foam, a cushiony material. You can see the foam lining right here in this helmet, and if we go to the next slide, you can't see any in there, but we'll look at some more later on in this presentation. So these are the three main parts of a safety helmet, and we're going to look at what is the job, duty, or function of the hard outer shell. What is the job, function, or duty of the firm foam lining? And what is the job of the strips of flexible pieces of foam? Now, please note there are other things that you can see on a safety helmet, but not necessarily on all safety helmets because it depends on the helmet, the design of the helmet, the maker of the helmet, the person wearing the helmet, and then obviously the activity that you're doing. So, boxers, their safety helmets have a huge section of padding around the cheeks and chins. Those are the main areas where they get hit during a boxing match. Chin straps are very common, but not always seen in all safety helmets. A face shield, something called a neck curtain, which is another foam padding that kind of covers the back of the athlete's neck. Okay, so let's start with the first piece, the hard outer shell. The hard outer shell has three jobs. Numbers 2 and 3 are pretty straightforward. Because it's a hard outer shell, it's going to prevent any sharp objects from piercing or penetrating through the helmet and get to the person's head. It also helps keep the shape of the helmet. So it's not like a floppy, it doesn't have like a floppy structure. It holds its shape permanently throughout the whole activity that the athlete is doing. But the main job of the hard outer shell is to disperse or spread the energy out. So when the athlete is experiencing a fall or a hit, the job of the outer shell is to spread that energy out. And let me show you what I mean by that. So let's think about if the outer shell was not there. So let's pretend that we have, this is actually an equestrian helmet. Equestrian is for the sport of riding horses. But let's pretend we have a baseball flying through the air, and it's going to hit right here. We've calculated the energy of that flying ball to have 15,000 joules of kinetic energy. Now, this is a make-believe scenario, but I'm using it to explain what dispersing or spreading out of energy means. So what that means is if there was no outer shell, all 15,000 joules are going to hit the person right here, the same spot in the head. So this person's skull and brain at this location is going to receive the full 15,000 joules of energy. So in other words, if there was no outer hard shell, no energy from the hit or collision would be spread out or dispersed. So what does it actually do? So what you're saying is you're taking that 15,000 joules of the flying baseball and you're spreading it out around the entire perimeter of the helmet. So let's say right here, this part of the brain or skull may only be getting 50 joules of energy. Less energy means less damage, right? So let's take that 15,000 joules of energy. You can't destroy it, but if we spread it out over a large surface area, then that means every section of the head is being impacted by a smaller amount of energy. So that's a very important job or function. So let's go ahead and leave this temporarily, leave this PowerPoint presentation temporarily and go back to our answer key. And let's focus on just the first row on page 3. What is the job of the hard outer shell? And that is to stop penetration, help the helmet keep its shape, and to spread or disperse the energy of a hit. So what you need to do at this time is pause the video and make sure that you have enough time to type out these 3 specific jobs and that your answer key is complete. So go ahead and pause the video and take the time to copy this. Okay, so now we're back. Remember, there are 3 main parts to a safety helmet: the hard outer shell, which we've just talked about, and now we're going to talk about the firm foam lining, and it is found directly underneath the hard outer shell. Okay, usually it is not directly against the person's head, because through older designs, athletes have communicated to material scientists, engineers, that this foam material is very scratchy and uncomfortable against their heads. So since then, the improvement or design of safety helmets has come along, and they've added these flexible pieces of foam directly underneath the firm foam lining. But right now, let's focus on what is the job or duty of the firm foam lining. And we've pretty much already addressed this on page 1 of our document. So the first one is that you have to remember that foam, whether it's styrofoam, polyester, it is made up of hundreds of thousands of air bubbles, right? So if we have that scenario of a baseball flying through the air and it's about to hit this little kid in the head, obviously the job of the foam is to absorb the kinetic energy from an outside hit or an outside collision, right? So all of the air bubbles inside, especially this section or portion of the firm foam lining, will deform a little bit. The air bubbles will pop, and the job is for that section of the foam to absorb all that kinetic energy so that none of it will get to the skull and brain of this little kid. Okay, that's for outside forces, but the foam lining actually has a very important job inside the helmet. Okay, so take a look at this scenario. You have a kid that's about to fall down and slam against a sidewalk or a street pavement, right? So this is the kid just laying like normal. But when you fall, I want you to remember from 6th grade, Newton's law of motion, right? Any object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by another outside force. So in this case, the kid is falling and he will stop falling because the ground, the pavement, stops him. But what you have to realize is this is called inertia. His head is going to keep falling down. His head is going to keep thrusting with a continuing momentum falling down towards the pavement. So eventually what's going to happen is this kid his head is going to hit the pavement. We don't want that to happen because that's when we get a concussion or we get an injury to the skull of the head. So the purpose of this inner foam lining is to actually absorb the kinetic energy of the motion of the head thrusting forward or thrusting down and get that to slow down, to get the head to slow down and try to prevent it from actually hitting the pavement in the first place. And also, you don't want it to hit the outer shell because the outer shell is pretty hard too. So remember, foam itself is very airy. It's soft and plush, which means it absorbs energy well. The other thing is that it deforms as it accepts energy. And that deformation is a good thing because as the styrofoam or the foam lining is deforming, it's actually slowing the head down. So this is more of a horizontal example. Let's look. This kid's about to bash his head against the wall. Like, I don't know why he would do that, but it's just a scenario. So this is before collision, and here is the collision. So again, this thrusting movement forward, this kid would continue to move forward unless acted upon by an outside force. Well, the outside force is the wall. The wall is going to stop the kid. But here's the thing. It's the helmet that will hit the wall first, and the helmet will stop moving. But the kid will continue, specifically his head, will continue to thrust forward. This again is called inertia, and this is the experience you have in a car when you wear your seatbelt. So the car may slam to a stop, but your body continues to go forward because your body continues to go into motion unless acted upon by an outside force, which is the seatbelt stopping you. So here's the deal. We need this kid's head that is thrusting forward. We need to slow down that forward movement and try to get it to come to a gradual stop so that the head never ends up slamming up against the inside layer of the hard shell and the wall itself. So again, as the foam is absorbing the moving head's energy, it's actually slowing the head down. And the deformation, do you see how the foam is flattening right here? That's the evidence that the foam is taking in and absorbing the energy of the head thrusting forward, the kinetic energy of the moving head, and therefore the head has less and less energy to move, and what you're actually doing is forcing the head to slow down and stop and prevent the head from slamming against the hard outer shell and also the actual cement wall. So let's go back to our Cami homework assignment. Go to page 3, and now let's look at the second, or actually it's technically the third row of the data table here. What is the job of the firm foam? And there are two functions. First, it will absorb the energy that's trying to enter into the helmet from an outside collision or outside force. And then here's the second job that we talked about, to slow down the head of the person that's using or wearing the helmet. Okay, so this purple here, that is for the third row. So just be careful what you're copying. So at this time, I would like you to pause the video so you have time to correct and complete the answers that you have typed in for the second row of your data table on page 3. Okay, so now let's take a look at that. What is found underneath the firm foam lining, right? So from the outside in, you go to the harder shell, then the firm foam lining, and then you go to flexible strips of foam, some soft foam. So here you can see the blue is the hard outer shell, the black is the firm lining, and what you see in white here, these are all cubes or strips of flexible pieces of foam. The red that you see all along here, again, are flexible strips of foam, and the white is the firm foam lining, and then this white right here is the hard outer shell. So on this bicycle helmet, the orange strips are all, if you put them between your fingers, they're squishy and soft and a little bit thick. Those are the strips of flexible pieces of foam. And the black that you see here is the foam lining. And then you can see a little bit, unfortunately, that little toolbar at the bottom is in the way, but you can see a little bit at the bottom there, the blue, that blue coloring is the hard outer shell. So what's the job of these flexible strips of foam? And it's pretty much common sense at this point. It's an extra, first of all, it's an extra layer. It's a second opportunity here to absorb any extra energy from an outside hit or the inside thrusting head, right? But it also adds comfort. I mentioned that earlier in the lesson. The firm foam lining, athletes were complaining, was a little bit too stiff, a little bit scratchy and rough against their scalps and their heads. So that's why they added the extra foam lining to add a little bit more comfort. And also, it makes your helmet fit snugly, so it's not like wobbly and loose. So we want that helmet to hold its position on your head, and the strips of flexible foam make that a snug fit for you. So again, let's go back to our CAMI document and let's copy the 3 jobs or 3 functions of the strips of foam inside of a safety helmet. So the 3 functions are listed in purple here. Go ahead and pause the video to give yourself plenty of time to have the opportunity to copy all of these answers. Okay, and now what you want to do is check your answers against the answer key that you see here on the screen for page 4 of your homework. We've already talked about in detail the purpose of the hard outer shell, the foam lining, and the comfortable strips of padding. So what you would do is just kind of summarize what we wrote in the data table above as a brief description for the job or function for those 3 portions or those 3 parts of the safety helmet. But if we look for this particular bike helmet or motorbike helmet, you have a padded area here in front of the chin, a padded area here next to the cheeks, and then a padded area in the back that basically it's a little flap and it covers the neck, specifically the portion of the spine that we call the neck. All of them, again, the key word here is padding. So padding would be the same job as you see here for number 2 or even number 6, right? Padding is soft, flexible, very airy, which means that the padding on the neck, cheek, and chin is going to do an excellent job absorbing energy from an outside hit or a crash or a collision. Specifically, the padding here protects the chin, the padding here protects the cheek, and then the padding here protects the back of the neck. Okay, so we're going to wrap up our lesson for today. At this point, we've confirmed all of the answers for pages 1 through 4 of our CAMI homework from last night, and we will do page 5 next class. We will do that together. But what I want to do now is get you ready for your exit ticket. The last thing that you need to do is complete your exit ticket and submit it, and then you'll be done for your science lesson for the day. I want you to think about this. How do mattresses react in a collision? So first, before we can actually answer that in our exit ticket, because that's going to be your task in the exit ticket, I want you to look at the design. I want you to make sure that you understand how mattresses are made. There's 2 different types of mattresses. One is what we call the traditional mattress, called a spring mattress. So these were the first mattresses that were made. And you can see that they are made of metal springs. All right? Metal is hard and rigid. And what they do is they attach the metal spring to a wooden frame. And what they will do is they will stuff all of this empty space with feathers or cotton, lots of plush, soft, airy materials. And then on the top here, that's where they're going to add even more layers of foam and other soft, plush materials. Okay? Here's another diagram of the same thing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of foam and or padding. Again, soft, plush, layered, very airy, they deform easily. And then underneath that is where we have the box. It's called a box spring base. And it's because you have the wooden box frame and then inside are a bunch of metal springs. But again, wood and springs, those are hard, rigid materials. So you can have what's called a spring mattress, or you might be sleeping on what's called a 100% foam mattress with no springs. As you can see, foam deforms easily. It's not just one layer of foam, but it's several layers of foam. All right, so there's another three different examples. And I'm sure many of you have heard about Tempur-Pedic foam mattresses. They make the same design, but they have a special name for a special company. They're a pretty popular company, and our exit ticket is going to be based off of a Tempur-Pedic foam mattress. All right, so that's a little bit of background information for you to help you be successful with today's exit ticket. And I just have a couple of announcements for you. So what you're going to do now is you're going to go to Schoology. Well, wait, first let's do this. I want you to hit save. For you, it says save and turn in here. But I need you to hit save because everything that we've talked about in this lesson, you've typed in. You need to make sure that it's saved, so go ahead and hit save now. So this document is technically in your Google Drive. You can also access it just like we did at the beginning of the class from Schoology. But the next time you open this Kami assignment up, it should show all of your answers from the answer key itself. Okay, so this is where we were. So now you're going to go to Schoology and you're going to complete the exit ticket assignment called Mattresses. It is a process grade. You have 2 attempts for it. So if you're not happy with your first score, you can do it again to try and improve your score. It's going to act as today's attendance and it's due by 3 p.m. That is actually not hard set. If you end up turning it in at 6 p.m. tonight because you were busy with other work, it's fine. Just make sure that you get this assignment in before the end of the week. And a very important announcement, starting next week, that means on Monday, January the 11th, is an A day. You will not have classes at 9, 10, 11, and 12 o'clock like you're used to. The classes are shifted now. All of your classes from this point on start at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. So my Block 1 students, you're going to come to science class at 7:30. You'll go to Block 2 at 8:30. Block 3 at 9:30, and Block 4 at 10:30. So that means you'll be done with all of your classes by 11:30 a.m. from this point on. By the way, we will still have our traditional activity period like we have had it since the beginning of the year, which is from 1:30 to 2 o'clock on Zoom. And the other thing that you need to be aware of is classes are now 5 minutes longer. So starting on Monday, they are no longer 45 minutes, they are 50 minutes. And just, to clarify, there is no homework for this weekend. Okay? So that's it. You want to go back to Schoology at this time, complete the exit ticket called Mattresses, do the second attempt if you need to improve your score, and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.